Welcome to Business Connection. I'm Liz Spencer. We're continuing the conversation here with Katrina Steffes. She's the CEO of Steffes and Associates Language and Translation LLC, also known as SALT. And we're talking right now about some examples of where translation and interpretation is really needed, and someone like you should be on the team.
Sure, diving into some examples of what can happen when you mistranslate. Sure. I mean, there's lots of examples around our community of signs, for example, that have been poorly translated. The grammar is laughable. There's lots of misspellings, and there's local community members who are aware of this, who speak that language, and they go and they tell other people that they know, and they take a look at it, they have a chuckle, and it's funny. But what happens when you take it to the next level, and now those signs are on a factory floor and people's lives are at risk, or you're talking about technical translation, you go to a new level. And so there's a lot of examples. A couple that I'd like to bring up are some examples of case studies referenced in the Journal of Specialized Translation. These case studies were from 1996. The first one is an example of a manufacturer of a bread making machine. Now, this manufacturer had their bread making machine, and they wanted to translate their manual into German. So they translated into German. Unfortunately, the translator made a mistake and translated the word steam incorrectly as the word smoke in the translation. So what happened when the product malfunctioned? Well, when the product malfunctioned and smoke fumes were going up in clients' homes, those clients immediately went to their manual to see what was going on. And when they looked into the manual, they were reassured falsely that the smoke was no problem, that this was totally normal, when in actuality the steam was normal, a normal process of the bread baking. So in the end, the moral of the story here was that the manufacturer had to recall the product, they had to pay compensation, and they suffered a damaged reputation. Now, this is a more positive end of what can happen with a mistranslation, but there's worst case scenarios of mistranslation in the technical field, for example, where lives are at stake. Absolutely. You have, people can die because of a mistranslation. Another example, another case study that was referenced in this Journal of Specialized Translation from 1996 is the San Juan, Puerto Rico gas company, at the time owned by Enron, had translated their material into Spanish for their training purposes, to train their employees. Unfortunately, the meaning was not accurately conveyed in the translation, which led to the employees who were trained being unable to detect a gas leak, which led to an explosion, which cost the lives of 30 people and led to more than 80 people being injured.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So mistranslations can be deadly and they can be costly, but they can be avoided. And that's what's important to remember.
Right. Well, and I think you've touched on so many things there that from the community sign that I think we don't realize the damage we're doing to our own company within in the group that we're trying to reach. We were thinking about a bread machine, and but
one word was mistranslated. Yeah.
Right, and then to the greater casualty with not having employees trained well enough to stop something.
Exactly, and then you have everything in between. We talked about marketing translation, for example.
Right.
Now, SALT had a client who came to us who had some marketing material created for an English-speaking audience, naturally, and they wanted to reach into the international market. They wanted to translate into Japanese. So as we take a look, again, thinking about all of the steps that are involved in the translation process, we take a look at the document and we see, whoa, wait, hold on a second. This says, proudly on it, made in the USA, and we're proud of that here, But in other cultures and other markets, they may not have the same perception, the same favorability toward our culture and products made in our culture as we do. And so it's important to remember that this may lead to a lesser view and a lesser perception. For example, in this instance with SALT, the client explaining to them that this comment on their marketing material may lead to a lesser impression because of the fact that, generally speaking, the perception is that domestically made products in Japan, when you're reaching to that market, are of higher, superior quality than those made in the United States. And there's a lot of research out there that supports this. One of the most recent and fascinating studies that came out was by the Pew Hispanic Research Center in June of this year that touched on exactly that, on global attitudes and trends, and it showed the marked decrease and decline from just in this short period of time from the start of the end of the Obama administration to the start of the Trump administration, and the drop in double digits for many cultures across the globe in their favorability and views of the United States. So Japan, we're talking about in this example of salt, was a drop of 15%.
Wow.
To Mexico, where the drop was 36%. Now, these are huge numbers. You don't want to ignore these numbers, and you don't want to be sideswiped by them when you go into a marketing campaign.
Right. Well, and I think this is one of the key services your company offers, is that not only are you translating it, but you bring the cultural awareness, the etiquette.
Yes.
And you give that as part of your services.
Exactly. We always give it as part of our services, that cultural knowledge and cultural coaching, as we like to call it. We're there with you from the start to the finish, so you don't have to worry about the stress of wondering what's going on in that target market. We're there to help you with that, to understand that target market and make sure that you are translating appropriately.
Right. And that's why hiring someone like yourself would be much better than, I mean, lots of us are, we play around with Google Translate and I think that's kind of funny, but that is has none of the nuances that you're speaking of.
Well, unfortunately, Google Translate is not appropriate in all contexts. Yeah. So some contexts, internal correspondences, something that's not going to be published, that's different. That's a different game than when you're talking about publications, manuals that are going to go out into the field and be used. That's when you need a human being who can understand the nuances of words. For example, the nuance of the word party. You want to translate from English into Chinese, and you're using the word party in your translation. Well, that word has multiple meanings. It could mean party for a birthday party for your children, party for a 4th of July celebration, party at a restaurant, party of 4, or party in a legal context, and they're all different. And you need someone who's going to be able to understand that difference and apply it appropriately and correctly. There's also nuances in the verb tense and the structure. We had a client come to us, for example, and had to salt translated their material using Google Translate, and we're hoping to use this. Now, just right off the top, you could see from that Google Translate that the name of the company, and we'll use here, for example, Steffes and Associates, Language and Translation LLC, was cut into multiple parts throughout the paragraph, leading to it being unintelligible and garbled. It had also translated the word released parties as announcing parties. Completely different. Are you releasing from liability, or are you announcing something to your customer? This is important, completely different, and changes the entire meaning of the text that you're sending out there in the field. Another example that I can think of is a client who came to us, again, with this Google Translate, wanting to use that, and they were selling kayak-related equipment and had some material that they wanted translated for that. Well, the word kayaker was translated as canoe athlete. Well, a kayaker doesn't have to be an athlete, and so what happened was that you would have, if you had gone with that, you would have been severely limiting your target audience.
Absolutely. Well, I think it just speaks to the kind of the rule of thumb of needing to hire a professional service. Talk to me a little bit about, we often hire a writer, we often hire outside marketing groups. Why not an outside translation and interpretation group like yourself? Why
not outsource your translation needs? Bring someone in to help you professionally. Well, the rule of thumb is that if a document or a presentation was created by a professional, then you want it to be translated by a professional or interpreted by a professional. Think about all of the time and expertise that is poured into your project. Hours and hours, and all of the knowledge and expertise. And then you want to go and put that same knowledge and expertise and that same time into the translation before it goes out into the field to be used.
That's an excellent, excellent way to put it. And we're going to be right back. We're going to continue our conversation. Stay tuned.